These days, as we feel hot, we turn on a fan, and within a few seconds the air starts moving. But thousands of years ago, when there was no such thing as a fan, how did ancient humans first come up with the idea that by moving a simple object, they could direct the air toward themselves? They didn't have a motor, or electricity, or any machine they could look at to copy the idea of a fan. Yet, at some point, humans discovered a simple fact. If you move a surface against the wind, that movement causes the air to move as well. But the real mystery here is that we don't know who that first person was, what they had in their hands, or at what exact moment they discovered this idea. It could have been a large leaf, a feather, or some flat piece of material. Or perhaps the first fan was so simple that no one at the time even considered it an invention. In today's video, we'll explore how ancient humans discovered this simple idea of moving air, how they turned that idea into an actual fan, and how that fan then evolved across different civilizations. But first, it's important to note that we haven't found exact evidence of the world's first fan. We don't know the name of the first inventor, the exact date, or what material the very first fan was made of. Therefore, we can't claim that the fan was definitely invented using a specific leaf. What we can do is examine the surviving archaeological evidence and understand what form fan technology took in ancient societies, and what kinds of materials and techniques were used to create that technology. We don't need any ancient texts to understand the basic purpose of a fan. The human body can feel the difference between moving air and still air. In hot conditions, moving air can aid heat loss through the skin, especially through sweating and evaporation. Ancient humans did not know the scientific explanation for this process, but they experienced the effect directly. A natural breeze might have felt comfortable, whereas stagnant hot air was much more uncomfortable. However, there is one important difference between a natural breeze and a manually created airflow. A natural breeze depends on the environment, whereas humans can create airflow in their immediate surroundings by moving objects manually. This basic physical principle is behind the fan. Moving a broad surface through the air causes the surrounding air to move as well. It's possible that this idea developed independently in different places through very simple observations. It's possible that early humans used various natural materials, but we don't know exactly what happened. Inventing stories to fill this uncertainty would not constitute evidence-based history. The archaeological record shows us fan technology at a much later stage. Representations of fans in ancient Egypt date back to around 3000 BCE. Imagery of fan bearers appears on Narmer's ceremonial objects. This evidence does not mean that the fan was invented at that time. If the fan was already a recognizable part of royal imagery, then the technology must have existed before that. However, it does give us an important date. By the beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE, the fan was an established object in Egypt. Egyptian evidence becomes even more interesting when we examine surviving physical components. A fan fragment from Middle Kingdom Egypt, dating to approximately 1900 to 1640 BCE, is a semicircular piece of ivory. It has multiple holes. According to museum documentation, feathers or leaves could have been attached to these holes. This small artifact tells us a great deal about fan construction. A fan was not just a random piece of material, it had a handle, it had a supporting structure, holes were carved into that structure, and lightweight material could be attached to that structure. This means that ancient craftspeople had transformed the basic effect of creating airflow into a repeatable tool. An ancient Egyptian fan handle preserved at the British Museum also provides evidence of this technology. The upper portion of the wooden handle has holes that were used to hold feathers in place. Such objects directly tell us that craftsmanship was required to assemble the fan. Archaeological research on plant remains from ancient Egyptian fans has also provided important information. Researchers have identified various plant materials, including date palm, dowam palm, and papyrus. Evidence of binding and sewing techniques has also been found. In other words, ancient craftspeople possessed the practical knowledge to combine the materials available to them to make fans. Plant material could be lightweight. It was useful for the wooden handle. Fibers were useful for binding. Feathers could be useful for creating large, lightweight surfaces. And the holes and stitching could securely hold the materials in place. This engineering was not based on any modern formula. It was based on practical knowledge of material properties. Ancient craftspeople did not need to know the mathematical value of a material's tensile strength. If a particular fiber worked well, they used it. If a structure broke, it could be improved. In this way, technology improves over generations. One design works, another makes changes to it. A material is replaced. An attachment becomes stronger. The shape of a surface changes. And eventually, A recognizable technology develops. The most interesting part of this process is that the inventor does not necessarily have to survive alongside the technology. The object may survive, but the names of the people who created it are not recorded in history. Something similar happened with the fan. We can see fans in ancient Egypt, but we cannot identify the fan's original inventor. We can identify its materials, but we cannot identify the first experiment. We can see the construction techniques, but we don't know who tested the first design. For this reason, it can be misleading to think of invention as a single moment. The development of fan technology was likely incremental, a process of small improvements in which materials, construction, and design gradually changed. Archaeology provides us with the surviving stages of this process, but the starting point has not been completely preserved. In Egypt, the role of the fan was not limited to practical comfort. In royal imagery, fan bearers appear alongside rulers. Elaborate feather fans have also been recovered from royal burials. Multiple fans were found in Tutankhamun's tomb. Some of them were highly decorated and provide examples of feather construction. Ostrich feathers were used in one famous hunting fan. The fan's purpose was no longer merely to create a breeze. The object itself had become important. Rare materials, craftsmanship, and decoration linked the fan to status and ceremony. A simple, functional technology could also acquire social significance. But the basic mechanism remained unchanged. The fan had to move. Air had to be displaced across its surface, and the human body had to benefit from the moving air. Different ancient societies adapted fan technology according to their available materials and cultural practices. Various forms of fans can be found in the ancient Mediterranean world. In East Asia, traditions of rigid and later folding fans developed. The exact origin of each design cannot be traced along a single, straight line, because both independent invention and cultural exchange were possible in the ancient world. The folding fan was a particularly interesting technological development. When carrying a rigid fan, one had to maintain its full size. The folding structure made the fan compact, while when opened it provided a relatively large surface area. This was a simple engineering solution: small when carried, large when in use. However, this development cannot be confidently attributed to any single inventor. Ancient technologies often developed through contributions spanning multiple generations and regions. Another important development in the history of the fan emerges when humans began using manually moved surfaces on a much larger scale. In South Asia, large manually operated fans such as punkah systems were used in later historical periods. Large surfaces could be moved repeatedly through mechanical arrangements and human movement. The basic principle remained the same. In a small hand fan, the human hand moved the surface. In a large punkah, human movement through a mechanical mechanism moved a much larger surface. Technology changed the scale, not the principle. The modern electric fan completely transformed this process. The motor replaced human effort. The blades can rotate continuously, airflow became controllable, and fans became permanent cooling devices for rooms. But to connect the modern machine to the ancient hand fan, we shouldn't just look at appearances. Ancient fan, human energy to moving surface to moving air. Modern fan, electrical energy to rotating blades to moving air. Thousands of years of engineering separate these two objects, but their underlying purpose is surprisingly similar. And then the original question arises again. How did ancient humans invent the fan? We don't have the exact answer regarding the first invention, but the evidence gives us a clear picture. We know that ancient societies combined natural plant materials, feathers, wood, ivory, and fibers into deliberately constructed objects. We know that handles and supporting structures were used. We know that holes, binding, and sewing techniques were used to attach feathers and leaves. We know that fans were already established in Egyptian royal imagery by the 3rd millennium BCE. And we know that later civilizations further developed the fan's shape, materials, and mechanism. Therefore, viewing the invention of the fan as the single discovery of an ancient genius may paint an inaccurate picture. The fan was a process. Nature provided humans with materials. The human body felt the effect of moving air. Practical experimentation preserved useful designs. Craftsmanship made those designs stronger and more reliable, and generations improved upon them. We do not know the name of the first inventor, nor do we know the exact details of their experiment, but we do have the legacy of that experiment. Today, the blades of a modern fan are driven by a motor. But thousands of years ago, humans had to rely solely on their physical energy and carefully prepared materials to create airflow. They didn't have electricity, they didn't have motors, they didn't have modern engineering equations. But they had observation, the ability to understand materials, and the need to solve a problem. And sometimes, the beginning of technology is that simple, not with some grand machine, not with the name of some famous inventor, but rather by noticing a physical effect and then trying again and again to make that effect useful. We can't see the first fan, but the fans that have survived for thousands of years show us just how far humans had advanced the technology for controlling air.